Welcome to the Aeon podcast, where the light of Gnosis destroys all ignorance, and what you thought you knew, you didn't.
Welcome back to the Aeon podcast. With me today is my good friend and sort of the kind of like my Gnostic cosmic godfather, Miguel Conner. So, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Alex. Great to be on your new venture, and I'd like to thank you very much to come on the day of my daughter's wedding, or something like that. Yeah. I don't know if I'm exactly the godfather. I'm just one of many independent podcasters trying to spread a little light.
Right, and you basically kind of open the door for this kind of podcast or this genre of podcast, because there's a lot of occult oriented podcasts out there, but what I'm trying to do here is kind of a little in your vein, a little in the Gnostic side of things, but I like to just kind of give you or introduce you to the audience for in case anybody out there doesn't know you or has never heard of you before. So can you explain about a little bit of your background and what you do?
Well, obviously I'm the host of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, more or less a weekly podcast that I've been doing for 10 years. God, where does time fly? And it focuses mainly on Gnosticism, alternative ancient Christianity, the occult, little conspiracy theory. I'm also a writer of a few books. And that's really it in a nutshell. I think as I tell people, in the real world, I pretty much you wouldn't recognize me from Adam. I'm a parent. I have 5 children. I have a day job. I like to watch football and all that other good stuff. But like the ancient Gnostics, and in the darkness, I do my own occult practices or occult studies, and of course this podcast that I do on the side. I mean, like the ancient Gnostics, you and I both know what made them dangerous was that dangerous information that they got through their experiences, their mystical insights, their research into philosophy and history and so forth. I think that's where the true danger is spreading that old time gnosis, that dangerous information. So that's really me in a nutshell. I'm nothing great. I've been very blessed to have amazing guests throughout the years, yourself included, and your great expertise on on Baphomet and all that other good stuff. So I've been blessed by having some amazing guests, some loyal and also amazing listeners, and we both sort of created our own little online community and our own little niche universe in the World Wide Web.
Absolutely. I think without your help, a lot of my articles wouldn't have been gone viral as they would have, or they wouldn't have in my case. But I mean, I think a lot of what you do, I think, helps people realize what's going on, especially with not really. I hate to say alternative Christianity, but just the whole idea of Gnosticism, the Gnostic path. And even the spiritual. Like direct spiritual experiences, like what we see in Philip K. Dick or Carl Jung. But I was actually listening to you on Mo's The Gnostic Warrior podcast, and he actually mentioned, or I guess you and him were talking about Santo Daime, or I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, but
Santo Daime.
Santo Daime, yeah. So I was just wondering, can you explain a little bit more about that? How does that relate to your own direct spiritual experiences that you've had, and can you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, Santo Daime is alternative Christian group in Brazil. Of course, I don't like that term that much. I think all Christianities are alternative. Probably never much of a normative Christianity, especially in ancient times. But anyway, Santo Daime is you might say, a fusion of shamanism and Christianity. And they use the Santo Daime plant, which is basically ayahuasca. It contains ayahuasca. And they've been doing this forever. I mean, you go to Brazil, and it's like they've got in the services hundreds of people. I mean, even the kids are doing the ayahuasca because they've been doing it for so many generations. It's part of their culture. I mean, they know how to handle it. So, and I know ayahuasca today is the rage and all that, but I did this 10 years ago, and I had just started studying Gnosticism. I had read the Nag Hammadi Library. I had, of course, read Elaine Pagel's The Gnostic Gospels, and but reading it through all, it was very familiar to me, but almost too familiar. Like I wasn't getting this, oh my God, this is just an amazing world. I mean, even when I read Sophia, it just seemed so natural that she was part of this Christian dialogue, this Christian mythology. But anyway, what really affected me as I was studying Gnosticism, I knew there was something there, but nothing was really catching. I mean, again, it was a sense of familiarity, and I was like, well, where's the experience? But I had read Carl Jung's The Seven Sermons to the Dead, and I'd read it from Stephen Heller's just amazing book, The Gnostic Jung and the Seven Sermons to the Dead. Highly recommend that book. I think it's Heller's best work, and it's really one of the great works for Gnostic philosophy and just occultism in general, and certainly Jungian studies. But anyway, excuse me, late at night, so I got a bit of a cough and a cold. But it really affected me because I was so, you might say, mesmerized or smitten by this god Abraxas. And you and I have studied him. And we know there's not much about him. I mean, it's like Stevie D calls him like Baphomet. He's an unfinished god. He's a god that's sort of still coming through history, and it's coming into our present, and everybody together, those searching for him, we're slowly building him together. You and I are certainly part of the Abraxas group, and you're part of the Baphomet group. So I was really affected by Abraxas by that. I also was really affected by Philip K. Dick. I had read the Valis trilogy. I'd read Valis, The Divine Invasion, and the third book, the one about Archer, I forget the title. But those books really crystallized what Gnosticism was about, and their thrust and their ethos. So, and also, for some reason, I'd also watched Donnie Darko for the first time. And that movie just blew me away. It's like I just caught the whole Gnostic essence in it, and I was rewatching it over and over again. And that summer of 2006, I went to visit my family in Portugal, and my uncle had become, you might say, a elder for the Santo Daime group, the satellite in Lisbon. And I just got there, and he's like, yeah, we're doing this thing called Santo Daime. You want to do it? And, of course, I'm always up for any sort of religious experience or ritual. I don't care what it is, whether it's, handling snakes or going to a Shiite mosque. I've always been very open. I enjoy these things. So I said, sure. And he'd built in the back of his house this little hut with Santo Daime, and they said, well, we're just going to do some dancing and singing and chanting, and you're going to take this tea, and that's about it. And I did it, and just started, you might say, tripping balls. But the thing with ayahuasca is that it's not like an acid trip. It's more like a bad acid trip. I mean, all of your fears and insecurities, and it's like you're already there at a bad come down. But you're still sort of tripping. The walls are breathing and all that, but it's horrible. And this lasted for hours, but you're singing and chanting, and the elders leading you for hours, and you're doing these choreographed dancing, and that's what keeps you grounded. It keeps you might say, in your body. But you start just hallucinating, and you're meeting your darkest fear. There's voices in your head. It's horrible. And at some point, it's so bad that it's almost like part of you, and I think it's the guidance of the elder and the music and all that, because the music sounds silly, but I think it's special in a way that it just it keeps you afloat, it keeps you grounded. And when you feel like your ego is going to collapse, suddenly something breaks, and suddenly your mind is full of all these wonderful insights about yourself, about the universe, and everything else. So I did that, and that was fine. And I did it because I was like, wow, this is great. I mean, it's like therapy. It's like years of therapy crushed in 3 hours or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you get all these breakthroughs. So I kept doing it, but there was one night where we had a big group. And the bigger the group, of course, like, it's that egregore thing. The more energy there is, the more intense it's going to be. And this was really long. It was about like 6 hours. We were there till dawn. And this time I had heard because other people share their experiences, what can happen. Anything can happen. And out of body is definitely something that happens. And lo and behold, I was sitting there and I just went right out of my body, and I was floating over Portugal. I was floating into the universe, beyond the universe. And I saw this like black mass of energy. And it was bigger than infinity. It was hard to explain. And all these satellites, like stars, were floating around it. And I thought, oh, these stars are like universes, and this thing can just crush them. And this thing didn't seem benign. It seemed overwhelming, just sanity destroying, very much like Jung described them in the 7 Sermons of the Dead. And I was just floating towards this uber infinite entity. And I was like, this is Abraxas. Oh, my God, this is as close. I am seeing Abraxas. And you might say, well, this is a hallucination. But the only thing, and of course I told this to Mo, a Gnostic warrior, is that my aunt, she had a broken leg. She was a few houses down. She woke up from her sleep and freaked out. And she got out of it. Somehow she was there wobbling with a broken leg, went downstairs, went 2 houses down, went right into the Santo Daime church, and basically told my uncle, her husband or ex-husband at the time, said, get Miguel. And suddenly somebody was shaking me, and suddenly I just flew right down into my body. And she was standing there, and I'm like, what's up? And she's like, I had a premonition that if I didn't come, you're going to be gone forever. And that was freaky that she would just, I don't think it was a coincidence. And I saw so much other freaky stuff there. The healings, the visions, all that. I knew this was, it was something powerful. And so since then, I was sort of, again, my interest in Abraxas and sort of doing things in the name of Abraxas, or to discover Abraxas, to finish up, has continued. So it was powerful. And I've done Santo Daime a few times there, once in Chicago. When I go back home to Portugal, I try to do it. And again, I highly recommend it, but it's going to be a complete horror show.
Yeah.
It's a gauntlet. It's like a mystery religion. In ancient times, mystery religions, they scare the living hell out of you. They want to get you out of your ego. They want to just really beat down your psyche. It either breaks or bends. But if you do it in a controlled system, again, with elders or shamans in a group where they know exactly, how to guide you, then it can be a very rewarding experience. So I would recommend it in that setting.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Now, the term Santo Daime, what does that actually mean? That's just out of curiosity.
Well, the daime is a type of plant. I think that's the plant that has the ayahuasca. So the santo just means it's holy. Okay. And it's a plant that, it's in the Amazons, and they mix it up with this other. You can't just take it. You have to break it down. Hippies and stuff know how to do this, but you break it down, and then the ayahuasca becomes active, and again, it gives you that trip.
Okay. Now, when you saw Abraxas, did you see like the typical depiction of him? Like, you have a chicken head, and you have like a Mithriatic soldier. Okay. No,
nothing. As we both know, there is the truth cannot come naked; it comes in images.
Right.
In our material world, he looks like that because everything's symbolical.
Right.
So, but this thing had no form. It was just this endless, amorphous darkness that could almost shift. It's very hard to explain. You couldn't even, there was no contour, there was no shape, because in pure nakedness this being would have no shape, but it's what I beheld.
Wow, that's really fascinating, because I've had similar experiences like that. like I actually had a vision of Baphomet.
Oh wow!
Yeah, this is a kind of I think a little before I wrote the book with Tracy.
Right.
So it was kind of weird. Like, so when we did that interview a couple years ago, it's almost as if you sort of predicted what my path would shape into. Yeah, it's weird. And then, I had a vision of him. Like, he had the goat head and everything, and then I also had.
Oh wow!
It was only lasted for a few moments, and then it went away. And then after that, I saw like a vision of sort of like a city, and it looked like a city, almost like a city for something out of Lord of the Rings. Really, really, really weird. I don't know what that means, but
Wow.
yeah. But only maybe like a year later, where I actually had some really trippy experiences with different spirits. A lot of them were actually quite negative, I must say. I don't want to get too involved in my story, but to make it short, I've had experiences with, with different number of spirits. Like we can describe them as demons. But then I also have experiences with more positive beings like Jesus. I had like a sort of a dream vision.
And what ignited it? Were you sober or?
Oh yeah, I was definitely sober. I mean, I didn't take any.
Yeah. People need to listen to this because everybody's gonna be, nobody can get ayahuasca, so people need to understand what is kindling these visions.
Right. Well, I don't know. It was weird. I just it's kind of a mix of things. Like I just kept reading different. I kept studying the Bible, the New Testament, and all of these Gnostic writings, and then.
Yeah, info dump. Yeah, sometimes when you just fill your mind so much, something breaks out.
Yeah, and somehow I don't know. Then I was talking with a person. I won't mention his name, but he was really deeply involved in the occult, and I don't know. It was really strange. Just by talking to him, I sort of opened a portal into another dimension. Somehow it was really strange, and. So what happened was I did get like a lot of some negative attacks, but towards the end I kind of learned how to deal with it just by actually using Jesus' name or using the power of the Holy Spirit. I'm not saying that I'm a totally fundamentalist Christian, but I mean there is some kind of like power behind
the name. Has power, no doubt. I mean, I've done the Jesus prayer, and that really messed up. I mean, that has some power, so I understand how you got there.
Right. I mean, I definitely use a Jesus prayer too. I mean, it's definitely orthodox, but I mean, whatever you got to use, what's out there.
Right. Yeah. What works.
Right. And I mean, there are other Gnostic prayers that someone shared with me, and that really helped. But anyway, going back to this dream vision of Jesus, to make it short, like I had a dream where he just appeared to me, and he's very bright figure, and he had typical depiction of Jesus. He had on like a hood. He was like dressed as sort of like a shepherd, kind of playing on the idea of the good shepherd. And he said that God sent his son to wash people clean.
Wow.
Yeah. So
he was a Caucasian Jesus.
I guess so, but I couldn't really tell. But it was still really bright, though. so I guess you could say he was a Caucasian Jesus. Yeah, I mean, typical depiction of Jesus. Really.
Yeah, one of the Bee Gees or something.
Right. So after that, it's almost like my whole reality was like turned upside down. Really strange. Yeah. So I felt. I think I was never the same after that. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and of course, as we probably both agree, everyone's different. What works for me might not work for you, and what works for you might not work for somebody else. And the Gnostics, they did so many different rituals, so they were tailoring their rituals to get the experience. So for everybody, follow your path, see what will lead you to that experience.
Yeah, and it kind of confirms to me that if the Bible is true, I mean, if we really are under this realm of the devil or the fallen angels, the archons, I guess Jesus, maybe it's just a theory of mine. He appears to like the Pneumatics or the Gnostics, and then it just to let you know that he knows about you, but this realm is not his. So it kind of and then it kind of explains why all the other gods are jealous of Jesus. Like, so I mean, I'm bringing to think that all the gods of all the different religions of the world are definitely real as well, but I don't think Yahweh is exactly the ultimate source, in my opinion. But I'm sure a lot of Christians will.
Right. St. Paul thought so.
Yeah. I mean,
but maybe it was just his word for the ultimate source. That's
right.
what he was. He was in the Hellenistic Jewish milieu, so that Yahweh was the philosopher's god. He was the creator god too.
Right. He's the lawgiver. I mean, just read 2 Corinthians 3. I mean, you pretty much get Paul's stance on Yahweh and Moses.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I want to get back to what I guess your own personal practice. Like, what do you do? Like, I know you mentioned the Jesus prayers, but do you do any other kind of rituals or magic or any other specific prayers?
I've tried everything. I mean, right now at this juncture in my life, with 3 small children, my ability to do all the crazy things, like go out into the woods or long rituals or all that fun, go to Theosophy Society and spend a day there. Those, I can't do that. So I've had to sort of tailor it. So a lot of it is just good old-fashioned meditation, self-hypnotism, going to church when I can, and a lot of prayer groups. I go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, as many know, and there are groups that we do meditation, we do prayer, and I can get an experience there. So these days, that's what I do. But I've tried everything. I mean, I've been to all different religions, from Hindu ashrams to Buddhist temples, plenty of Catholic, all these different Protestant services, and again, if I try hard enough, if I'm humble and open, I usually will get an experience one way or another. But these days, because of time and other duties, I would say good old meditation and prayer.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what my philosophy is at the moment. I mean, I haven't really done anything too crazy. I mean, I kind of feel like my experiences kind of scared me away from the goetic side of things, or the Crowley, the Lehman type of stuff.
Right. No, I hear you. And of course, it can't be overstressed. Of course, dream work, simply knowing your dreams, opens up into a massive realm. And of course, writing, a lot of writing, creative writing, active imagination, all those things. I mean, the tools are there. Obviously, meditation is such a good spiritual technology that's used to, but there's many paths, and each one of us just has to find that and have an open mind, be humble, and the divine will call upon us. I think, like you've known, and as we've read from Jung and Philip K. Dick, it can be frustrating because not everybody is like Socrates, who could just go at will into a mystic trance and talk to his daemon every day and know what the weather was going to be next week. Sometimes it comes to you, the angels or the voices of the other world speak to you, or you have a vision, and it might be years before it's time for you to have another really deep-seated experience. So you got to hang on to those few experiences, study them. Don't tell yourself what the ego wants to say, that this was just, a vagary of the mind or a lapse of reason. But these things are real, and they can be studied, and they can continue to be rewarding until it's the next time to have one.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I see it too. I mean, I really cherish my experiences. I've definitely learned a lot from this past year, and it almost feels like 2016 was kind of like it was a eye opener for a lot of people collectively, but also it was an eye opener for me on a personal level as well. But now, for you personally, how do you see your perception of Gnosticism now that you're a father? Is it any different before that or prior to that?
Well, at first I did mention Philip K. Dick and Carl Jung, and I should explain that they had very limited experiences. I think Dick had one or two or a few, and that consumed his life. And Jung, of course, had his experience going down into the underworld, which he got the Red Book. And as we both know, Philemon, his guide, he confesses in the book later on that Philemon was Simon Magus. So that's mind-blowing for us Simon Magus fanboys.
Yeah.
So I got to keep mentioning that. But no, as a father, I think it just intensifies my Gnostic view, my idea that the world is an illusion and not exactly a friendly place for souls. Because, I mean, when I see my children, I look and I see that they're beautiful, beautiful souls, bright souls. They haven't been fragmented by experience, by ego. They really are wonderful beings of light, but they're also so fragile, so easily manipulated. I mean, anything can happen to them. And as we've seen recently, I mean, obviously you can mention Pizzagate, but you don't even have to do that. You can talk about the church, the church and the priests and the molestation and what's going on in schools and the horrible things in Syria. You realize that it's one of the greatest horrors of the world is when children have to suffer, that they have to be in pain or to be in hunger. And I'm very fortunate, but in a way it does strengthen my Gnostic view of what a corrupt world this is, that we would allow innocence and beauty to be corrupted, and not even allowed, but I mean, there is evil out there just gunning for children, just wanting to destroy. I mean, we can look at our childhoods and we go, God, the children, we went through a lot. I mean, there was a lot of meanness and cruelty and things that really scarred us for life. So being a father hasn't made me one of those, well, maybe this is a better world. I'll make the best of it. Look at all the blessings. No, it's made me realize it's accentuated the light from the darkness.
Yeah, even when you look at all the corruption in politics, or people talk about conspiracy theories and all this kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, it's all true, but at the root of it, the corruption exists in matter itself, and even the principle of matter, or the creator of matter. I mean, it all goes back to the source. So, I mean, that's really the Gnostic ethos, But
agreed. I mean, it's basically a simple formula. What is temporal can't be good because there's definitely suffering in there. There's forgetfulness. So it's better to look at what is eternal and try to hang on to what that is eternal. And I see the eternal in my children, but I also see that the eternal is beyond there, and that's what I continue to look for, and hopefully spread the word on that.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of pains me to say this, but when you look at the world, and especially now, I mean, it's getting more and more apparent. Like it's like reality, or the material world is like sprouting its true fangs. It's like its fangs are revealing more and more as time goes on.
Yeah.
Really
at least on a cultural level, it seems reality is very malleable. It's very confusing. It's very betraying. I mean, just go to your Facebook feed, and it seems it's Orwellian what we're seeing. I mean, nobody knows if it's the Russians. Nobody knows if it's pedophiles on high places, if the election was even a reality or a joke, if the Russians are trying to bring us down. I mean, it's horrible, and it's creating divisions. I mean, people are just going at each other on social media, on the internet. Everybody's on their little silo of reality, or their little satellite and alternative reality, and we're just sort of getting broken up. I mean, it's almost diabolical that information was what saves us in Gnosticism. Right. And it seemed we were coming through the age of information with the internet and all that, and that was going to open up new vistas of enlightenment and brotherhood and all that. And it seems like the Archons just turned up the heat. They were like, we're just going to drown you in so much misinformation, you'll never know what is that saving information. So this is a Philip K. Dick world where we don't know what reality is anymore.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like after this election, I don't know, I had this strangest feeling like I was in another alternate dimension. Really strange. I don't know. I can't explain it, but it's like, when Hillary lost the election and Trump won, it's like almost like, wait a minute, this is not real. This is somehow.
Yeah, it was surreal. It was one of those moments where it's almost like something's breaking open
surreal.
behind reality.
I don't know.
And for me, it was intense because the Cubs had just won just a few weeks before, and that was just like so momentous because it'd been 103 years, and the city is so ingrained to this baseball team that would never ever win. So, and of course, you looked at all the craziness of 2016, David Bowie, Prince, all that, the election. It's just, something about it's almost like 2012 is happening in 2016.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, like 2000, all the prophecies of the Mayan calendar are actually happening now. Like, I guess we're 4 years. Behind,
It's bizarre. I mean, the best we can do, what I've been telling people is, right now, don't try to save the world, man. Save your sanity, because it's going to the highest bidder as we speak. Every person in this world.
Yeah, and it's getting more and more apparent. I mean, like even just like the reaction of like the Trump win. I mean, I'm not a really big fan of either of these guys, like Hillary or Trump. But I mean, Hillary. I mean, I think she's the worst of them. But
bad. She is bad. Yeah.
But that being said, I mean, but when you look at the reaction of like all the liberals and the left, I mean, they were going insane. Like you even saw like Rachel Maddow. She was ready to jump off the window as soon as the Trump results came in. It's really, really funny. But it's been bizarre, and it's just going to get even more bizarre. But welcome to the jungle. Yeah. I mean, just the nature of our reality. I mean, that's what the Gnostics realized, 2,000 years ago,
Yeah, exactly. Except the internet has created an extra layer of the matrix, if you would. It's created it's a double bind. We got the real world, which is not the real world, and now we have the internet, which is sort of the new Kenoma, which is even more bizarre, and everybody's just accepted as real. That's all the information. It's real. It's on the internet, but I don't believe it. But I'm staying there. It's just. I think the Archons they're turning up the heat. They did not like it that humanity might be awakening at the turn of the century.
And if you look at even like that TV show, Westworld.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like there's a lot of Gnostic parallels going on there, especially what's happening in the real world, or the so-called real world that we're experiencing.
Powerful show.
Yeah, like what do you think about that show? Like what's going on there?
Oh, I thought it was great. Again, it's very Gnostic. You've got the classic false reality. You've got the Dickian themes of what it is to be a human and what is the nature of reality. You've got very layers of reality and time that seem to intermingle. And, it's all there. I mean, to the T, to the characters. You've got, Dolores. She seems to be like an Eve Sophianic character. You've got the Demiurge and Anthony Hopkins and the Man in Black and Arnold. But it's kind of interesting because a good Gnostic movie isn't overtly Gnostic, like, Jupiter Rising or Jupiter Ascending, was just so basic. Right. It has to be more nuanced, and it has to throw a new sorts of mythologies out there, because that's what the Gnostics did. They wrote mythology, and they tweaked it, and they changed it, and the bad guy was a good guy in the next gospel, and then Mary Magdalene was this in the next gospel. So in this one, you've got the three characters that I just mentioned, but they seem to be actually benign demiurges, because they've wanted the robots to wake up, to have Gnosis in the end, you find out towards there. So there's some new wrinkles, and I like too is because it also ties in the notion of the eternal return from Nietzsche and Uspensky, that all of us are just kind of coming back over and over. There's no real death or birth. We're just stuck in the same timeline over and over. Anthony Peake has talked a lot about that. Mm-hmm. And those of us who can sort of wake up in our own lifetime can sort of move up the ladder or get out of the cycle, but most of us will be for infinity just reliving our lives over and over again. So I was pleasantly surprised they brought that theme into it.
Yeah, I mean, even Dolores, I mean, her name in Spanish is actually the sorrowful one, or the one pain, or she's like kind of like the Sophia Achamoth, she's like she's crying over this abortion
that
we call the world.
Right, and of course, and she's an Eve character, a Sophianic character. So there's a lot out there. I still have to unpack because, again, in my life, I get one shot at a TV show once a week, and then I have to maybe catch up on blogs and other people finding insights or think about what these characters did. But so far, Westworld is some of the best sci-fi I've seen on the screen in a long, long time.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really that continuation of Philip K. Dick's vision. I mean, just so much of it, relates to Philip K. Dick, and Anthony Peake, I think, would have really great insights into that show. I'm really curious what he thinks about that show too, because there's so much going on.
If he has, if he has time, but it is also interesting again with the idea of the Gnostic myth. You just don't copy it and say, oh, this is Gnostic or this is Dickian, because Dick was very adamant in his work, especially in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, that he thought that androids would never be human because they would never have the capacity to have empathy. To him, a human being with a soul had something that have true empathy, true heroism for other people. Obviously, Ridley Scott disagreed in Blade Runner and changed that around, and it seems in Westworld, we'll have to wait till the second season, that, the robots, the androids can become conscious, they can become human, and they can feel empathy.
Yeah, and it's pretty much like a pre-programmed story that Dr. Ford, a.k.a. the Demiurge, pre-programmed somehow, and then you see that also with the Arnold character with then Bernard.
Right.
And he's almost like some sort like another, I guess, like a betrayer, like a Judas type of character. It's really weird. He's kind of like a Judas. He's like kind of like a fulfiller in a way. Like he betrays. I think her name's Teresa. I think she's like one of the managers, or maybe. He sort of fulfills, I guess, the mission of the Demiurge. It's kind of like in the Gospel of Judas in a way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you think about it, maybe the true Demiurges is the board, the corporation, although they seem to be in trouble. And again, with the second season, who knows what other layers they'll bring out. I mean, it's like the Pistis Sophia, where you've got Authes, where the Aeons turn out to be the bad guys, or Marsanus in the Nag Hammadi library, where there's a god above god above god. You never know. With the Gnostics, it's almost like there's no ending. There's always something beyond every veil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I want to get to that kind of goes kind of a segue into the next question, who are your favorite of all the Gnostic sages? But I can guess that question, but you can go ahead.
I know. I think we mentioned it. I like Simon Magus as a mythological character, and of course I like his writings, the Great Annunciation and so forth. But obviously it was probably not Simon Magus, probably whatever community of mystics were behind there, the Simonians, whether they were Samaritans or they were Alexandrian Jews. We kind of maybe a little bit of both. But I like obviously Simon Magus as a character. Obviously I'm keen on Mary Magdalene because I think she's remarkable, especially when you look at her through Gnostic lenses and see her really that as a character she was a leader, a mover, something very important. I've always had a soft spot for Nerea, who appears in the Gnostic text. I think it's either on the Origins of the World. I think she's like Abraxas. She's like an unfinished heroine, and I have this feeling that there will be more out there on her. And of course, I've written about her on my site. I really like all of them. I like Basilides. I like Carpocrate. All of them, I think, really had some powerful experiences and were spreading some great stuff. Of course, Paul, but I could say Paul is Simon's, but that's another discussion. So that's another discussion. And just all of these Gnostic characters who stood up to the powers and principalities of this world, they're all cool in my book.
Yeah, and it's kind of, it's not weird, but it's kind of expected. But when you look at all these characters, like Simon or Mani or John the Baptist or Jesus. I mean, all these guys, like, and it never turns out good for them in the end. Like, they always wind up getting beheaded or crushed or crucified. I mean, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, I don't think the Mandeans ever say that John the Baptist was killed. I mean, in their narrative, and it's probably just as old as Christianity, he wasn't beheaded or killed. So we have to watch out. What's the party line and all that? I mean, they said Simon Magus flew and then fell down and broke his legs and died. So we really don't know what happened to him, but we do know that Orthodoxy and most of the religious and secular powers hated them, but because they were so important, they had to basically write them in and sanitize them into the Gospels and other Christian narratives.
Right. I mean, like, if you see guys like Irenaeus and Hippolytus, or Clement of Alexandria, Epiphanius, I mean, all these guys, they dedicate, like, all these writings to these guys, like, trying to refute them. So, but at the same time, you know, a lot of people like to demean them. But why would they dedicate so much time and effort in trying to debunk these guys? You know, I mean, I'm sure because it kind of explains, like, their influence is just, like, all over the place. You know, I mean,
yes.
So
they were a threat. I mean, I've always had my kooky conspiracy theory that they were covert Gnostics, and they're trying to slide in, you know, through history. But of course, no scholar ever mentioned to Robert Price and others, and they're like, no.
Yeah.
They hated the Gnostics. It's simple as that. I'm like, but I love my conspiracy theory. I'm keeping it for a while because it makes me warm at night.
I definitely think Hippolytus is probably a secret Gnostic lover. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think what's important too is remember the idea of Gnosis was not bad in the 2nd century. I mean, Irenaeus is like, they got the Gnosis so-called falsely, whatever you talk about. Clement of Alexandria. I mean, Irenaeus, what does he say? God became man so that man could become God. The idea of us becoming divine and these amazing beings through divine knowledge was in the air. So I think much of the church fathers probably in one way really were part of that zeitgeist and probably did embrace that. But at the same time, they weren't going to allow other sects to have that information. I mean, it's interesting because what did Irenaeus say about Simon Magus? He said, Simon Magus believed in faith saves. Mm-hmm. And that's very interesting because that means Irenaeus probably hated the idea of faith saves, which is, again, it's a very interesting that he would be against that because he probably did believe in some sort of divine knowledge plus good works and all that. So maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, and you know, even the concept of faith and knowledge, they're actually kind of similar in a way. And a lot of the Gnostics actually, they deified even the very idea of faith, right? In the figure of Pistis, Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, faith wasn't something that they just like, oh, well, you know, just believe in whatever you want. No, faith is something very real. And I mean, and even Basilides said it was like sort of like a substance that you have in your soul you cultivate somehow. And
it was important. I mean, as some have said, maybe it wasn't Gnosis was the process, was the path, the map. But eventually the experience, you could equate it with faith, that transforming trust and union with the gods. So, so there was nothing wrong with faith. So again, Irenaeus and all these guys in the Gnostics probably agreed or they overlapped, and just like Plotinus and the Sethians. I mean, they were against each other at the universities, but in a way they probably had more in common than different. They just disagreed on certain points. Yeah,
and this kind of goes back to Westworld. I mean, like, if you remember, all these androids or the hosts, they're always in a state of forgetfulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, and when you look at the mystery schools, or especially the Orphic schools of thought, they all believe that, you know, whenever you died, you would go back into the underworld and you drink the river of Lethe.
Right.
Now, if you remember, now they come back and reincarnate into another body in the process of the transmigration of souls, but now, in the mystery schools especially in the Orphic cult that definitely influenced the Gnostic cults, people would drink the cup of sobriety, or the initiates would drink the cup of sobriety, and they'll be baptized in one of the river sobriety. I think it was a specific term for that, the opposite of leaf. I just forget the name of it, but it was definitely another river in the Greek underworld, or Hades. But whenever they drink of it, they suddenly remember their past lives, or they attain omniscience. Yeah, and I think now I'm looking at it right now. So the term is called Mnemosyne, or Mnemosyne. Sorry, yep. So Mnemosyne was actually a daughter of the Titans of Uranus and Gaia. But anyway, then Zeus and Mnemosyne would actually gave birth to. They gave birth to the 9 muses. So there's a lot of Gnostic correspondences with Greek mythology and Greek philosophy for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean the cult of Orpheus, they were definitely proto-Gnostic, or maybe Gnostic. I mean, the idea that we were shards of divinity, shards of Dionysus trapped in the material world and all that. And so, we had to remember our destiny and who we really were. So So yeah, that stuff was definitely in the air before the Gnostics were around.
Yeah, and it's definitely sort of developed. I mean, I think it's a really ancient tradition, Gnosticism, in my opinion. It kind of goes back all the way to even before Egypt, I think. It's definitely a movement, and it was just transformed, century by century, especially when Christianity emerged from that milieu. But anyway, I want to kind of go on now. What do you think, or where do you think Gnostic studies are going? What are some of your favorite Gnostic scholars that you come across?
Well, let's see. Good question. I mean, obviously, I'm very impressed with April DeConnick's recent book, The Gnostic New Age, and that's the one. I think this type of book appears maybe every 5 to 7 years. I think the last. Really, you might say, a book that summarizes but also crystallizes Gnostic studies. It gives us the latest. It gives us a trajectory. Would be probably David Brackey, The Gnostics. And then I think April's new book does that, and she puts a lot of wonderful new wrinkles about who the Gnostics were, and obviously makes an argument that the Gnostics brought a unique type of dispensation, a metaphysical orientation that the world really had never seen before. Although it culminated with them, of course, we just talked about Orpheus and the Egyptians, and the Merkabah Jews and all that, but it really did culminate with the Gnostics, and how subversive and rebellious it was, how it really changed a lot of things, and how dangerous it was. And I know April probably wants to continue these studies to see how the Gnostic philosophy really affected the rest of history. So I would recommend definitely April DeConnick's The Gnostic New Age. I love her 13th Apostle. No matter what you think about Judas and whether he was a good guy or a bad guy or what he was in the Gospel of Judas, she also really summarizes or encapsulate the sort of ethos of the Gnostics and the Greco-Roman around her. So I would say those. Of course, I love the work of Robert Price. I love the work of Stephen Heller. There's just so much. Tobias Churton, Andrew Philip Smith. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah, and this kind of also sort of relates to your newest book, Other Voices of Gnosticism. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure.
Newest book?
Yeah, it was obviously Voices of not obviously, yeah, like everybody knows. No, Voices of Gnosticism came out in 2010, I believe, end of 2010, and it was a list or a printing of the transcripts of some of my interviews, plus Andrew's commentary and my commentary. And in this one, we had an amazing array of scholars, most of the translators of the Nag Hammadi library, from John Turner and Einar Thomason and others, plus some of the really, groundbreaking scholars of Gnosticism and Christianity of our times, like Bart Ehrman, Elaine Pagels, Karen King, Bruce Chilton, and so forth. So that was a very successful book. So Andrew Philip Smith, who has Bardic Press, we decided to do sort of the sequel, which we call Other Voices of Gnosticism. And this one also touches upon the ancient Gnostics, but sort of expands, and it goes into, instead of the Sethians and the Valentinians and all that, and of the ancient Gnostics, we try to focus on Paul of Tarsus, John the Baptist, Philip K. Dick, Carl Jung, and as you're guessing, we go farther into history instead of just the classic Gnostics. We touch upon the Cathars and the Mendeans and the influence of the Gnostics in the Middle Ages, in the Enlightenment, and Philip K. Again, as I'm saying, Philip K. Dick. We also expand on the Hermetics and a whole bunch of other topics. So it's more of a, as I'm saying, it's more of an expansive, broader book with, again, some of the great scholars and researchers of our time that include Gary Lachman, Stephen Heller, Richard Smoley, Sean Martin, who else is there? Oh, just Tobias Churton, and just other great scholars, Eric Davis, who was one of the he was on the editorial team that gave us Philip K. Dick's The Exegesis, and again, just a great group of scholars and researchers really giving us the essence and the truth about the Gnostics throughout history.
Yeah, I really love all those guys. I mean, I read Tobias Churton's, I think his latest book on Gnostic sexuality, and Simon Magus. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, great book. So he talks about John the Baptist and how he relates to Gnosticism and the occult. I mean, he wasn't just sort of this like country bumpkin wearing furs and eating bugs, as people tell us, but he seems to be really a spiritual power breaker of the time, sort of a spiritual George Soros or something like that. I mean, he was in the back and he was powerful. He was influential. He sort of king made Simon Magus and others. So it's very interesting. Yeah,
and I even have one of my articles in Andrew Philip Smith's latest the Gnostic magazine. It's a really good magazine. If anybody is interested in picking that up. One of my articles, I think it's called "The Gods of the Imagination." But anyway.
Good article.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to get to my last question, and this is sort of related, but also kind of unrelated. Now, I know it's sort of random, but who do you think the character of Melek is like? And do you think the Yezidis are Gnostic? And the reason why I ask this is I've been doing some research on the whole Yezidi cult, and it was and we actually talk about this in the Baphomet book with Tracy Twyman. And when you look at the figure of Melek, he's very similar to Yahweh in a lot of ways. It's really strange, but go ahead. Sorry.
No, why do you see him as similar to Yahweh? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, just the way he describes himself and how his creative process in matter, it just really sounds similar. And when I was reading the way he describes himself, and when you compare a lot of passages to like Isaiah or Jeremiah, it sounds pretty similar, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's so hard to say, Alex, because groups like the Mendeans and the Yezidi, I feel they came out of that Judeo-Christian Mesopotamian Gnostic vibe of the 2nd century, probably maybe even earlier. I wouldn't be surprised, maybe a lot earlier. I think Gordon White argues in his book Starships that the Yezidi might be way older, maybe even older than the Sumerians. I mean, they have some deep cats, but the problem, well, there's several problems, is that they basically were sort of always on the run, always on the edge of extinction, always surrounded by larger neighbors that just wanted to, on a whim, exterminate them. So a lot of their literature sort of adopted what was around them, and sort of, again, a lot of the characteristics of these religions sort of came into the literature. B, we still don't know if what they're giving us is the truth, because even as scholars have argued with the Mendeans, sometimes they just sort of would give scholars or missionaries what they wanted to hear, and sometimes it just came out garbled. So it's very, very hard. And some believe that they still keep their sacred texts with them, and nobody has seen them, or at least gotten a good view of their real, true sacred text. And that includes the Mandeans, the Druze, and of course the Yezidis. So it's hard to say, and there's so much misinformation. I mean, obviously, the Yezidis were thought to be Satan worshippers because of the Melek Taus, the peacock angel. Mm-hmm. Even though they believe that the word Satan is completely forbidden in their religion. And then you wonder, was it true, or are they telling this to the Muslims and the Christians around them, or what exactly is going on? So it's very hard to say. And needless to say, because they've gone through so many centuries, and a lot of their texts, especially the Mandeans, are contradictory because their myths have changed, different priests that have come in. It's hard to say what they really are, but I feel, from what I've studied and probably need to study harder, is that the Yezidis were indeed part of that Gnostic Mesopotamian vibe, as I call it. They were part of it, but so much has changed, and there's still a lot that needs to be learned from them.
Yeah, I get the same vibe, because I think it's a subject I've been neglecting for a while, and it's something that I really want to investigate more in the future. But we definitely touch on that in the Baphomet book, but I don't want to get too deep into that right now.
Right. I mean, okay. Why is he a peacock angel?
Yeah.
Are there peacocks in the Middle East?
I know.
It makes you wonder that they come maybe from the Far East. I mean, it's there's still so many fascinating questions that we still need to find out about. So in due time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just so much stuff out there we haven't really investigated in depth. I mean, like, we can have these talk shows or podcasts for like another 5 years, and we still haven't really reached the pinnacle of what we call Gnostic studies. But
no, we've still got hundreds of years. I mean, it took hundreds of years to decipher the New Testament and get Q and the priest hypotheses and all that. So we got a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. But
you and I will be robots in a park sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the androids, the hosts will be studying these Gnostic texts.
Right, so, yeah.
But strange times, huh? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'd like to thank you for coming on my show, and I mean, I really like to kudos to you. I mean, helping me out with my articles and putting my stuff out there. I mean, I really appreciate that, and I mean, it's definitely something that I haven't not noticed. So, I mean, I really.
Oh no! You're doing great work, man. You're spreading the Gnosis, so I am more than happy, and you're going to overtake me in every possible way soon. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm very glad to see that you're in the podcast writing world, and we'll do it one waking up at a time, or what do you say? Saving divine sparks one pink bean at a time. I think that's your idea. I use it on the show sometimes.
Yeah. I made a joke. I just forget how exactly I said it. It was like something like keep digging the demiurge one pink beam at a time.
I like that too.
It's kind of
let's keep at it.
Right. But I'd like to thank you again. So I really hope you come back another point in the future and discuss any of your future projects.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me on, Alex.
All right. Thank you so much, Miguel. All right. Take care.
All right. Hey, thanks, man.
All right. Bye.
Bye.